Hey there guys, Martin here, coming back at you today, and another time in the gates of Istfell. And you know what that means, right? We're here for some, well, they're not spoilers anymore, but we're gonna talk about some cards of Kaldheim, and we talked earlier, last week, about cards that probably are going to see a little bit of play, or that are going to see competitive play. And we got some cards, they're pretty interesting, and today we're going to talk about cards that were great contenders to be on that list. These cards could be on that list, and some cards that are in there could be in here, but today what we're mainly focusing is getting to talk about the cards of Kaldheim that could be broken. So there are some things I didn't include in the competitive list because they need a little bit of setup and they might just not work so easily. Today we're going to see these things like what are cards that could be broken, what cards that, depending on the setup or the enablers that we have, they could even see a ban in standard. So it's mostly about that, but also a little bit of cards that didn't quite reach the competitive video, the competitive list. So if you didn't see the competitive list, go back and see my last video. I will link it in the description if I remember. I'm going to remember. And today we're gonna talk about these cards. So let's start. Oh, this is not working. No, is this working? Is this working? Okay, now this is working. So first card is Turoff, God of Fury. That is Thor, and well, let's read the card. 4 mana, 5/4 trample, legendary creature god. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Turoff deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. Okay, so the idea is, let's say your opponent has a 1 toughness creature and you go for something that is not a combat damage, so let's say a shock or an ability, and that exceeds the toughness of that creature or exceeds the loyalty counters on a planeswalker. The rest of the damage you get to ping somewhere else. If you don't have another creature or another permanent of your opponent that you can target, then you just go face. Interesting. There are some things that this could do. And also 4 mana 5/4 is a great body. So we're going to see how to exploit that in a bit. But also we're going to talk about Turoff's Hammer. And this is another card that is exploitable. Now this is an artifact equipment for 2 mana. And it has equip 2. And the equipped creature has, you pay 2 mana, these are 1 and a red always. And you tap that creature, you unattach the hammer, and it deals 3 damage to any target. You return the hammer to its owner's hand. So how could this be exploited? If you have a way to make this repetitive. So if you have things that untap that creature that had to tap to get the hammer out of it, and then if you have some kind of way to generate a lot of mana or just decrease these ability costs. So it's a lot of setups, but I know someone can do it, and then you have 3 damage that is really recursive or even infinite if you have it. I don't think that this is so easy to pull off, So I don't think this is like gonna be a combo deck or something that people are going to be able to make quite easily. But I do think that Turoff has some things that we can do, and let's show it. So Turoff really remembers a little bit of this Brush Taunter Star of Extinction combo, where if you have Brush Taunter on the table, this is indestructible, and whenever it is dealt damage, you deal that much damage to your opponent. That's it. Star of Extinction, you deal 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, so this is a board wipe that you even destroy your opponent's land. And then Brush Taunter is indestructible, it's going to remain on the battlefield, and that 20 damage is going to be directed to your opponent. So it's a game-winning play, unless your opponent has more than 20 life. But this is doable, you know, it's a Wrath, a creature with indestructible that can be exiled or get -1/-1 and die. But we saw a little bit of this scene play. Now, Turoff here, he has a better body than Brush Taunter, that is true. And you're gonna be able to build decks around Turoff, so things that deal damage divided by things. Turbran increasing the damage by 2 every time, so you destroy a creature. The excess damage you're going to deal to something is going to get +2, and then you go destroying things. So you can try to build a deck around Turoff. But if you want to have the insta win, you need to have your opponents have creatures or planeswalkers, and they have to have you're going to deal 20 damage to them if your opponent only has 1 creature and that creature has like 4 toughness, then Turoff is only gonna deal 16 damage to your opponent's face. So there's also a little bit of math involved. Still, it's a good card. Of course, Turoff is going to die, but he's going to see the damage and he's going to be able to point at your opponent. So that's the whole idea of how Turoff and his hammer could be exploited. Don't think this is going to be great. It could be... I mean, Turoff could see play in Standard, but mainly the only card that is going to see play is the God itself. I don't think the hammer is really great. And also the equipped creature only has +3/+0 if it's legendary, which is really, really bad. But still. Next card we have on the list is Quakebringer. And this is something that I thought, okay, can this be competitive? Because we have some giants that were present in some metas, like Beanstalk Giant, and we have Bone Crusher Giant, which is a great one. And we also have Kroxa. Kroxa is another giant. So I thought, hey, maybe this. But then you have to really try to consider about every game that this is going to see play or not, and how good is this. Like, as a one-of, is this a good card? And Quakebringer is really, really slow. 5 mana to get a 5/4 body is not so great. Your opponents can't gain life. We've seen that. It's okay, but it's not something so great. The big thing about Quakebringer is that at the beginning of your upkeep, this deals 2 damage to each opponent, and this ability triggers only if this is on the battlefield or if Quakebringer is in your graveyard and you control a giant. So what you want to have is multiples of these, maybe 1 in the battlefield and a lot in the graveyard. But in the best case scenario, probably you're going to, okay, best case scenario you have all 4, but 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 in a reliable best case scenario, like you have 3 or 2, and they are dealing 4 to 6, but only if you have a giant on the battlefield during your upkeep. And if your opponent just board wipes you, then you have none, and these cards that are in the graveyard are gonna be worse. And even worse than that is that after sideboard, I mean, this would probably be like that kind of mid-range Rakdos build that we saw a little bit of play by early Zendikar Rising. And this is nice in that build, but at some point your opponent is going to bring Graveyard Hate after sideboard. So I don't think that 5 mana for this creature, with Foretell of course, but not kind of the creature that you want to foretell, not kind of the deck that you want to be doing that. So that's why Quakebringer fell down of the competitive play and he's in here. Other than those giants, we don't have a lot of other great things. I don't think that Izzet Giants is going to be so great. I hope it can be seen a little bit of play, and if it does, maybe you'll find these in some of those decks. But we'll have to wait and see. Next one we have Orvar, the All Form. So this is 4 mana legendary creature, Shapeshifter, a mythic with Changeling. It is of all creature types. And it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, you create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. So at first I looked at this and I said, oh my god, this is just incredible. And then I realized that he only creates a copy of one of the permanents that you target. So I said, oh, okay. So this is kind of nice in a limited format, but that you have some combat tricks, maybe some things like that. But this thing of copying things when you go for instant or sorceries, it's a lot of setup. You go for a 4 mana 3/3, it has to stay alive, and then you have to be doing things that doesn't seem so great. I've thought on some scenarios of maybe Esper Doomfortold getting this. It's not a bad card. It could see play, but it's kind of hard to exploit. The other ability is whenever a spell or an ability that an opponent controls causes you to discard this, you create a token that is a copy of target permanent. So generally, when you think of these, you think, okay, discard effects generally by the beginning of the game are kind of between the middle to the late game, when your opponent or you have less cards in hand. And at the beginning of the game, probably you're just gonna create a token that is a copy of a land you control, or maybe of a creature your opponent controls, so that you can block his things. And by later on the game, I don't know if this is so great, but of course it's always good to have a little bit of discard hate, if we can say. But I don't think that this card is gonna be great. So okay, the next one is Thibauts Trickery, and I think it's one of the most talked cards in Kaldheim. This is a 2 mana instant, and it says counter target spell. So that was one of the things that people were talking more about this, like, hey, counter on red. But then you go and you read the rest because you know that there might be a trap. And you say, and you see in here, choose 1, 2, or 3 at random, so you don't choose. Its controllers mills that many cards, and this is so that you don't counter something that is yours and get what's on top of your library. We're going to get to that. And then exile cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. Okay, so what does this do? If you counter your opponent's spell, like let's say a board wipe, then your opponent is going to choose 1, 2, or 3 at random, mill that many cards, and then he's going to start exiling until he reaches another spell. Probably that's not going to be another board wipe, so this could be kind of your protection from board wipes. Still, it's not so great. Your opponent might just find something better, and you're already attacking his face, and he finds an Ugin, I don't know. So that is not the best scenario. The best scenario you want on this is turn 2, you go for a 0 mana thing of yourself, you counter that, and then you mill yourself, you exile some cards, and then you just get something really great, like, I don't know, Ulamog, Ugin, or at least something that is good for a turn 2 play. And then you cast that. I have a deck that I'm already brewing in my mind, and I have a sketch of it that will see this card. I want to try it. I don't think it's going to be good, but I think it's going to be fun. Pretty fun. So probably not competitive, but could be broken. I don't know how, because of this effect that you mill some of your cards. You cannot go to some scry effects, get something on top that you really want, and then counter something, get that card, you know? So that's why they had to put this on. So red always have these kind of fun cards. I really want to play this. Next up is Kozima, God of the Voyage, and I have thought a lot about this card because it seems great, and it was in my competitive list for some time, but then I got back and I said, maybe not. It's kind of awkward, it's kind of slow sometimes, but let's read it. Kozima, God of the Voyage, 3 mana, 2/4 legendary creature god. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile it. Okay, so as soon as this enters the battlefield, you cannot exile it. It's just on the beginning of your upkeeps. And so as soon as it enters the battlefield, it's not going to do anything. So your opponent can destroy, can do something. Okay. And then let's say that it's your upkeep now. You may exile. You do. If you do, it gains. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if this is exiled, you may put a Voyage counter on it. So you put the Voyage counter. And the thing is, you go for this on turn 3, on turn 4 you exile it, and you play the game, you try to grind these Voyage counters a bit. When you need something, you're going to use the other part. Okay, so if you don't choose to exile it, so if you want this to return, this returns to the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters and draw X cards, where X is the number of Voyage counters on it. So this gets big, draws you cards, tries to find you the cards that you need, and this is really great, but seems slow sometimes. I'm going to compare it with other cards soon, but let's read the Omen Q first. This is another Moto double face card. So the back is the Omen Q, 2 mana legendary artifact vehicle, 3/3 crew 1. Whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles that many cards from the top of their library. Okay, you may play lands from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, so it doesn't matter if the Omen Q is in the battlefield. If you exile lands, then they are yours to play. So some people were imagining if this would be good in rogues, for example. It might be. It's not that bad, you know. It helps you milling, but and you crew for 1, you get these. I mean, any creature that is not an O something can crew these. These attacks, kind of protected, and you also get to play lands. That's really interesting. But overall, I don't think this will be a competitive card, and that's mostly because you have to analyze Kozima. And I had to compare Kozima with what he had in the past. So here are some of the things we have. I mean, we still have Gadwick in standard, and we had like Hydroid Crazes. So Gadwick the Wizen, it's an X 3 mana 3/3. So you may play this for 0, just like Kozima would come in the same turn. The thing is that they are pretty different. When Gadwick enters the battlefield, you draw X cards, so you would draw nothing. And Gadwick has this really centered build around blue spells that says that you tap non-land permanents that opponents control, so you can kind of go for a tempo deck with Gadwick. Like, try to be aggressive on the beginning, then go for a Gadwick, refresh your hand, and start doing things like unsummon. You unsummon one of your opponent's creatures, you tap the other because of Gadwick, then you can attack and attack and attack. That is kind of the way that Gadwick works, but the thing is, Kozima, you put it on the battlefield, you exile, and then after some turns you get it back with drawing X cards and growing Kozima. Gadwick, the other way, you hold it in your hand, you go for those lands first, and then you go for a Gadwick. It's going to be a 3/3, and you're going to draw those cards just as well. They're different, they're really different build around decks. Kozima is much easier to go for dual or 3-color decks. But Gadwick is not seeing a lot of play. I don't think that Kozima is so much better than Gadwick. It is different. And then we have Hydroid Crazes, which everyone knows is a card that still sees play in Historic. It's an X 2 mana creature that enters with X+1/+1 counters, and you draw half X cards and you gain half X life. Flying Trample. This is really good, kind of a mid-range card that enters the battlefield, replenishes your hand, and just keeps pressure on the board. So I think that Kozima is kind of between these. You know, it grows like Hydroid Crazes grows while you're ramping, but it can be a good early creature just so that you don't have a little body in play, because on turn 3 Hydroid Crazes is a 1/1. I mean, if you have 3 mana, Hydroid Crazes is a 1/1. Gedwick the Wizened is a 3/3. Kozima is a 2/4. It can block some things. Maybe that's what it could do. I think it could be broken on the right deck. Probably some kind of control-ish deck that you kind of want to grind those Voyage counters, get card advantage, and win after that. But probably on a pretty control-ish kind of deck. Still, it's hard to read, a hard to read card, and we're going to see what it's going to be doing. Okay, now we have Ascendant Spirit. This is a snow creature, spirit, 1 mana 1/1. And this is also hard to think about, because at 1 mana 1/1, this doesn't have flying, isn't evasive. And why am I thinking like that? Because at first when you see this card, you believe that this could see play in a mono blue tempo deck, like, because first it's easier to get snowlands on a mono color deck. They are all gonna be untapped, you know. There are some things like that that you have to think. And then you think, okay, this is a great menacing. I mean, this is probably great in limited. But let's read the abilities. For 2 mana, this becomes a Spirit Warrior with base power and toughness 2/3. It's not until end of turn, you pay 2 mana, this becomes a Spirit Warrior. It has power and toughness 2/3. For 2 mana. You pay 3 mana, if this is a warrior, so if you already paid 2 mana, now you pay these 3 mana, you put a flying counter, and it becomes a Spirit Warrior Angel with base power and toughness for 4. Okay, so for 3 mana, now we have a 4/4. And then for 4 mana, if this is an angel, which it only becomes an angel if you pay the 3 mana, or if you have some way to break this, and there is, but we're gonna talk about that. If this is an angel, you put 2+1/+1 counters, and it gains. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. The thing is, on mono blue tempo decks, I mean, you generally don't have a lot of lands. Hitting the 4th land is not going to be so common, and also you never have lands untapped so easily. You do bring a lot of counter spells, but you're kind of going for some creatures or Curious Obsession, some little things, while you protect these creatures with some really cheap counter spells. And then having this menacing might not be so great, and not being able to be evasive by the beginning of the game also might not be so great. So I discarded mono blue tempo as a house for this, and then I was like, okay, is there another house? And then maybe control, I thought, but actually this wouldn't see playing control. It's kind of do nothing. I mean, we don't want to win with these in a control deck because it's just too slow. And actually doesn't look like it, but it's a little bit mana intensive, because imagine your opponent at some point you lower the shields for the second ability. You paid like 3, 4, 5, 6 mana in this creature, and your opponent goes and destroys with Fatal Push or something. So of course that's not what generally you're gonna be doing, but sometimes you just have to do things like that, and being punished like that doesn't seem great. So this is going to be a good card. Maybe it even sees a little bit of play in standard, But in historic, I don't think so. In limited, it might be great. You need snowlands, but it might be great. You can pay the 4 mana to put +1/+1 counters a lot of times, and at this point you're going to be drawing a lot of cards because you also get this other ability a lot of times. So it's an interesting card, a great mana sink, but probably not so competitive. Can be broken. You can have that artifact that is coming on Kaldheim that says that your creatures are of every creature type, or of the creature type of your choice, something like that. And then this is an angel. Automatically you just went down on 2 steps. Still not great, not so relevant. Could be wrong. I could be wrong. It's always needed to say that I could be wrong in any of these, and this is just my thoughts. They could not be translated in what the metagame will become. The metagame is unpredictable. You are not gonna be able to really tell what's going to happen. But still, it's really nice to think, and also really nice to be a little bit prepared for what's coming. So that's why we do this. Now we also have another card that can be really interesting, and it is Blood on the Snow. Great artwork. Great artwork. This is a 6 mana board wipe. Snow sorcery, and you choose one. You destroy all creatures or you destroy all planeswalkers. Okay. Hard to see a black board wipe that says destroy all creatures. Of course, this is a 6 mana. So it's really heavy. That's why it's not competitive. But it's fun. It's a really fun card, and I don't know if you can ramp and get to this. It could be a little bit broken. But the thing is that to ramp to these, you need some things. And the thing is, you need to exploit this second ability in order for this to be a good card. A decent card, actually. And what does this second ability say? Then, after you destroy everything, you choose one. You return a creature or a planeswalker with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's nice. Where X is the amount of snowlands spent to cast this spell. So that's the thing. You need to have snowlands. You're not gonna see these on a 3-color deck, maybe on a 2-color deck, but still, you're not gonna have great mana base if you want to go for the synergies of snowlands in a deck that has 2 colors, because you need some fast, some lands that enter untapped, and the double colored lands that are snow, they enter tapped. Anyways, if you have like X equals 4, that's already a nice card. It's like for 4 mana you board wiped, and for 2 mana you got something that costs 4 back to the battlefield. This is a really interesting card. I want to try it. I don't know where I will be able to fit this, but this is going to be really fun. Okay, next up we have Tundra Fumarole. 3 mana is no sorcery, rare sorcery. And it says, this deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Okay. You add colorless mana for each snow mana spent to cast this spell. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Okay. So if you have a mono red snow deck, this is good because you can deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker so probably destroying them. And you get 3 mana. You get 3 mana, I don't know, you could go for an artifact like Big Red. You could go and just activate abilities. If you have like 4 mana, you go for this. And let's say you have Crawling Barrens. Let's say you just spent 3 red Snowlands to cast this. Now you can activate your Crawling Barrens and grow it. So something like that. I think that this could see play in that kind of decks, but it's not so great. It's just an okay card, an okay removal that is really going to need these kind of decks to see play. Nonetheless, it's an interesting and possibly a fun card to play as well. Okay, now we have Crippling Fear, and this got me thinking a little bit. This is 4 mana sorcery. You choose a creature type, and creatures that aren't of the chosen type get -3/-3 until end of turn. So this is like Languish, is the same cost, but instead of -4/-4, you go for -3/-3. This could be a board wipe, not a great board wipe, but just like you choose a creature type that is not in standard, for example, or just that is not on the board, and every other creature is going to get -3/-3. This is interesting, not great, but interesting, and could see play. The other thing that you gotta think is, okay, maybe I want these in my tribal deck. Actually, you do not want these. This is much more a control card. It's going to be bad in your rogues deck. Don't put this in. It's also going to be slow. Rogues deck sometimes don't get you the 4th land drop so easily. I don't know. It could be a sideboard, like against Gru aggro. You just don't get the red rogue, Robber of the Rich. But still, the metagame is going to shift, new things are going to appear. I don't know, maybe an angel deck comes, maybe a warrior deck becomes good. We still don't know that. But it's nice to have this kind of card. I think that this might see play, because against some decks this is going to see play instead of others. The thing is, it's possibly just a sideboard card. It's a Wrath. Wraths might be slow, so I'm not counting on this seeing a lot of play, but it's interesting that we got. Also, really nice artwork with this shadow of the, I don't know, demon berserker getting to this town. It's really nice. Okay, so we got Mystic Reflection, and there was a lot of thinking that anyone that sees this card has to do instead of in order to understand and try to get what this wants to be doing. So this is a 2 mana instant. You choose a non-legendary creature, and the next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. Also foretell for 1, that's a really nice cost of foretelling. And this is versatile, which is great. I mean, you can use it when something of yours is coming to the battlefield, or when something of your opponent is going to enter the battlefield. The thing is, you could turn your opponent's bombs or planeswalkers into copies of a really bad creature that you have. So now I'm thinking about token generations. Like if you have something that generates some number, some amount of tokens, you have some tokens like at the beginning of the game. When your opponent goes for that planeswalker or something, you just say, no, that is a token. Really nice, right? Or you can have something that says, or you can have like a really big creature of yours, let's say Dream Trawler, and then you have Dream Trawler and some tokens. I think that is the setup that you want for this card, because now if your opponent goes for something, you go for Mystic Reflection, that becomes this token. And if you go for a token, let's say Omen of the Sun, wow, then you cast this, you choose Dream Trawler, you get 2 copies of Dream Trawler. You know, this is really interesting card. It's really hard to predict, so this could be broken, but it needs setup. It needs a setup. It does nothing if you have no creature to target when your opponent goes for that planeswalker. And it also might do nothing in a lot of other cases, but it's a card that we're going to see people trying and brewing and doing things around. So keep an eye on this. This might be broken. Okay, so I think that we've got to the last card. Yep. And it's Kaia the Inexorable. And I had to think a lot on this card because of the emblem. I mean, the emblem's pretty damn nice, and you only need to have Kaia stay on the battlefield for 2 turns. Still, let's read it. Kaia is a 5-mana planeswalker that is returning. This one is 5 loyalty counters, and you have a +1. Put a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature. It gains when this creature dies or is put in exile. Nice. Return it to its owner's hand and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So that's nice because if you have already some creature on the board that is going to be like the protector for Kaia, you go for Kaia, +1. If your opponent removes that creature to go after Kaia, you still have a blocker. Great. And you also get the creature back. It also has the -3, which is great. I mean, it should be great, and it is. And it says exile a non-land permanent. Boom. Any permanent, non-land, your opponent has an artifact, Ugin, a planeswalker, a creature. You exile. This is a really common -3 on 5-mana planeswalkers. Like just destroy something or just protect it. A way to protect your planeswalker, you know, sometimes you create a token. And this is like a really good one. And then we have -7. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, your graveyard, or among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. So every turn, if you have it, you're going to be doing something for free. If you get this emblem, that is going to be really nice. You know, like planeswalkers out of your graveyard, out of your exile, out of your hand. It's a really hard emblem to deal with. I mean, after your opponent gets it, probably end game. Most probably end game. It's really hard to go around this. And so that's the thing. We also have Elspeth Conquers Death. So if this was destroyed, and at some point you are able to get it back with Elspeth Conquers Death, It is a 6 loyalty counter planeswalker that already goes to 7. So that is a threat for standard. But it is kind of slow, it's still a 5 mana planeswalker. And the thing here I think is you really need the synergy, the something to go around this ghost form counter. Because if Kaia enters the battlefield and +1 for nothing, then probably the probability that she's unprotected is higher. That's why you want this. Anyway, this is an interesting card and could be broken. I don't know. We're going to see how people are going to be doing control decks around her and see if those are going to be good payoffs. Well, anyway, this was our round of cards for cards that could be broken out of Kaldheim. This set is coming on Thursday, which is 2 days from now, and I'm really excited about it. Tell me what cards and what tribes or what synergies you want to see, and thank you for being here today.